Hi. I know that what is currently on the minds of many educators is the impending move back to in-person instruction, the move back to campus that we need to plan for this coming school year. Maybe some of us have not yet completed these plans. And so when we hear about the schools around us who have already decided on a plan, we feel overwhelmed and a little bit of panic. At this point, we may have the tendency to make a hasty decision. So I'd like to take this opportunity to recommend a set of steps that could help you to come up with this plan in a more strategic manner. There are 5 steps in the planning process. The first is to pause and reflect on lessons learned. Second, identify parameters and their implications. Third, explore learning delivery approaches and what these imply for implementation. Fourth, sound out the stakeholders involved. And fifth, finalize logistics and other details. For now, let us just discuss the first 2 steps. I know you're excited to jump to step 3, but we must resist the temptation to do so because steps 1 and 2 are very critical to the planning process. So in step 1, you're asked to pause and really take time to reflect on your experience as an educator or as a school during the past 2 years and what you have learned about effective teaching while we were on lockdown. Now, why reflect on this? Can we not just do this when everyone is already 100% on campus? For one thing, it is important that we retain as much of the pandemic structures, procedures, and practices as possible to lessen the adjustment that you will be asking teachers, students, and parents to make. The new modality of learning will already entail so much readjustment on the part of everyone, so we must try to keep all other changes to a minimum. Another reason is that the administrators and teachers in your school will be so caught up in the implementation of the plan to transition back to school that you may forget some of the most important lessons that you have learned during pandemic teaching. Let me give you just one example. During the pandemic, we followed the MELCs. As the name suggests, DepEd identified for us what are the most essential learning competencies. This was very helpful to us because students used up much more time learning from home and therefore could not complete the required set of competencies on their own. So the reduced set, although they still could not complete it many times, was at least more manageable for both teacher and student. Many of us also realized that the reduced set of competencies allowed teachers, especially those online, to ensure that students had a better understanding of these competencies. Because the teacher next school year will be teaching in person, be it hybrid, high flex, or some other arrangement, we might have the tendency to teach the topics at a faster pace than during the pandemic, and the tendency to start adding back as many topics as possible. Isn't it better to carefully select only those that are important to add back to the curriculum? For example, some science experiments or some math topics that students need to know for their academic work in college. So a careful reflection with all faculty about what are the important lessons learned during pandemic teaching may remind us to be very selective about what we will add back to the curriculum, if any, so that we will avoid giving the students a heavy workload and the situation where teachers start once again rushing just to finish the topics required for the quarter. So in this primer, you will find other examples of some of these valuable lessons learned during the pandemic that we can try very hard to keep in mind as we make plans for this coming school year, as well as for the next possible. Pause the video at this point and think about what are some of the lessons you may have learned during emergency remote teaching. If you wish, the following guide questions may help you. First, what did you cut out or stop during the pandemic that now suddenly you realize you no longer want to bring back in the future? Because they didn't really work very well for teaching, right? So maybe some of these are grading requirements, or as I said, a congested curriculum. Second question, what worked out during remote learning? Can you keep these as we move forward? So hopefully, for example, teachers will be able to keep the use of technology to enhance learning, since many teachers learn these skills. What new structures, policies, and programs should we create or recreate? An example here could be many schools, because they do want to keep this new technology skills of both teachers and students, have decided that they will reserve one day of the week to go online already as part of their normal schedule. This can just be an initial reflection. You may just jot down some of your thoughts and then think about them more closely at a later time with your fellow teachers. Now, we go on to step 2, to identify your school's non-negotiable underlying parameters that will govern the reopening of your campus. In this step, you are asked to think of what non-negotiable parameters will serve as the principles which underlie the aims and nature of your transition. What principles will frame how you will make the move back to campus? These are important to identify, because when you need to prioritize, make trade-offs, right? We don't have the budget for good technology for high flex, but we have bigger classrooms, so it will help you make the trade-offs, make the important decisions if you know what are your non-negotiable parameters. These are also important to identify, because these will help you evaluate whether your transition back to campus plans need to be readjusted as you go through the school year next year. Let's say one of your parameters is that whatever plan you choose, your school must remain agile, able to efficiently move across learning modalities, depending on alert levels and other circumstances, and in compliance with local and national government requirements. So to remain agile, that means you need to be able to do your transition plan, right, with some students in school and some students at home, but you may suddenly need to go back to fully remote learning. And you must be able to make that transition very easily and seamlessly. So if this remaining agile is one of your non-negotiable parameters for the plan that you will choose, then, when you think about it, maybe you'll think to yourself, one implication could be that your school needs to draw up 2 sets of classroom routines and protocols. So you must put in place and inform everyone about protocols for remote modalities and another set of protocols for in-person modalities. Students and teachers should know both sets of protocols and routines so that they can easily shift to any learning approach as dictated by current government alert levels. One other implication of this parameter of agility is that you must take measures to easily identify and isolate persons who may have been exposed to a student, teacher, or other individual who tests positive for the virus. So maybe you can carefully arrange your schedules and venues and keep a small group of the same students and the same staff together in what is commonly referred to as a bubble or a pod. You need to restrict this group of students and this group of teachers to the bubbles that they belong to. If somebody in the bubble becomes sick, then only the persons in that bubble need to shift back to fully remote modality, and you don't need to make the whole school go remote. So this might be one implication of this parameter. So having these parameters will help you make further decisions and ensure that you are coming up with a coherent set of plans for your move back to campus. So for your last reflection for this video, think about the parameters that your school might, or that if you're a teacher, that you might suggest to the administrators in your school that could be non-negotiable. Some of these are agility, safety, of course, for everyone, wellness of teachers and students, which means that, if possible, don't make such complicated plans. Another one is quality learning, right? So if these are the non-negotiable parameters, what implications will these have on your transition plans back to school, right? All of these are explained in greater detail in the primer in chapter 1. I hope that you will read your primer because they give you the background information that you need to do your step 1 and step 2 effectively.